So in this special edition of our Poetry Month
Yes,
series,
indeed.
we have Bob Holman
How do you
today
do?
talking about Bill Knott.
Bill Knott is not.
Bill Knott is
Oh
not.
my God! To hand over all those books. Look at all these books. Let's
There we
get
go.
all of
Here
these
we go.
books.
We got all the
books. All the books.
All the
and
books.
all the books. Just piles of books and
We've
books.
got
And these are
Henry.
more books. And you see, what Bill took.
He likes Bill Knott. He's got
Are
a
you
couple
kidding
of,
me?
couple of his books.
I
mean,
got a
we've
few of Bill's books here.
one.
More
More.
Bill. More.
Look at the great typography.
Yeah.
So many. All right. So
Oh,
we're going to talk a
go
little
about
bit
the rest of them
there's
over
so
there.
many more.
Yeah,
We're going to talk a
keep
little
them
bit
coming.
today about how Bob was inspired by Bill Knott.
Which was began in 1971 in Chicago, where I've lived all my life in New York City, except I was born in Tennessee. My pico, as they say in Hawaii. My roots are in Harlan, Kentucky.
I bet a lot of people are learning that for the first time.
Well, Wikipedia says I'm from Harlan, Kentucky, which most people assume is my birthplace.
Sure.
But having spent time in Hawaii, where you learn that pico, like all words in Hawaiian, has numerous meanings. The gathering place, like here in my apartment with Professor Steve Cannon overhearing us and behind.
Blessing us.
Elizabeth Murray drawing back there. The gathering place is a pico, but it's also your umbilical cord.
Amazing.
And what the way it happens is your parents will take your umbilical cord and bury it, and that place where your umbilical cord is, that's where you're from. That's your pico.
I love that.
And it really, because in the U.S. we always say, "Oh, my traveling salesman, itinerant preacher, military family. We were from everywhere," but you gotta pick a place, to be your place to say, where are you from? So, Lyons, Georgella Lyons, who's from Harlan, Kentucky, like me, her pico's there, former poet laureate of Kentucky. She wrote that poem, Where I'm From, that now is an exercise for all poets. I am from clothespins and carbon tetrachloride.
Yes.
Well, at any rate, after I got out of Columbia, I then went to Chicago to work in the Whole Earth bookstore. And while I'd studied with Kenneth Koch at Columbia, and that is the greatest education you could ever have, another guy from Cincinnati, Jew from Cincinnati, what an incredible time. And with Frank O'Hara had died the month before I came.
So what year is this?
66 was when
66?
I got to New York
right.
from my pico and from New Richmond, Ohio, where I graduated.
And then
from
you're
high
in
school.
Chicago.
And I graduated in 70, and so I'm in Chicago at 71.
What a dream.
And it's a dream because Ted Berrigan and Alice Notley had just
Yeah.
come back from London, and they were hanging out shooting pool. And there were a terrific bunch of Chicago poets, Alan Kornblum, Bob Rosenthal, Shelley Kraut and Steve Levine and Rose Lesniak, and just all these incredible poets, most of whom would move to New York.
And so many of whom are thought of as,
We're all New York.
For sure.
We're all New York. I've been here ever since, except for in Chicago, I worked at the Whole Earth bookstore in Evanston, and anyway, Bill Knott was there too.
The fate of the bookstores is another story.
Paul Carroll, the editor of Big Table, and the modern American poetry, sort of the alternative to the new American poets, had just published that big fat book, and there were pictures of everybody, and that was the anthology we loved, and these were the poets we loved, and my two guys were Ted Berrigan and Bill Knott. And so I got to hang out with Bill and get to know him.
So he enters your consciousness in Chicago in the early 1970s.
Right. And this is the book that Big Table had come out with, the Naomi poems, Corpse and Beans, which I never really understood until I was in Paris and saw the Robert Desnos book called Corps et Bien.
Oh, my goodness. I love it.
And that's, of course.
So Corps et Bien and
Corps,
body.
Corps et Bien.
Yeah.
Body and
body and goodness.
Good well-being, whatever. becomes Corpse and Beans with
great.
Bill Knott, in just the way he is. And
so this book is from
this book was published in 79.
Okay.
No, sorry, 68.
68?
68 by William Knott. Yes.
And the press.
Then the press is Big Table.
It's
a Big Table book,
yeah.
which also brought us Andre Codrescu's first book, and so many wonderful License to Carry a Gun, and so many other great writers. Probably, this is volume 1 in the Big Table series of younger poets. And I just loved it and read it and used it. And then, when Bill moved from one apartment to another, he was always an outsider to himself as much as to anyone else. It's just the way he was. He was, a one-off guy. And but what brilliant, in the great pain of existence, his humorous take on life completely pulled me in to his poetry. And one of the things he does in this book is he uses parentheses. I don't know, let's see. Yeah, there you go. In the title, you see he uses parentheses to separate the parts of titles.
I love that. I've actually been working with someone like that. He's giving the location, he's giving a little more information, sort of. Yes,
and
creating a.
Well, one of the things that it was so influential. Oh, in my first book, which came out in 79, that's what came out. It's called Tear or Tear, to Open, Tear to Open. The first poem begins with, let's see if we can get this with parentheses, but nothing inside it, right? Empty parentheses, a null set for Bill Knott, right? I guess you can say in homage
null set for Bill Knott is a really great phrase. It sounds great.
Go ahead. Open the door. Hello, white water. Hello there, bridge. Hello, figure on the other side of the bridge, saying hello. Just myself. And so right at the top of what I was doing was Bill Knott everywhere. His first poem in this book is called Poem. All right, if I have to be famous, let it be for this great starfish shield I made, and the sands of her face drift over her body.
It doesn't need to be more than that.
It is exactly. And of course, Bill's entire career was about anti-fame.
Yeah.
And his last years, when he was doing all his publishing himself.
So talk to me about these, because we have tons of these little pamphlets here.
Right. He just got so tired of being rejected that he.
Yeah, and this is something that people may not actually be familiar with. So in the back of all of these kind of pamphlet-sized self-published things, you'll see in the back, it'll say published by the author, the date of the printing, and his own personal address in Boston at the time, at Emerson.
Exactly. And he would distribute these free to anybody who wrote them. I see I have more than one copy of some of these.
Some of them will have handwritten titles like New Uncollected Poems.
Oh, that's the one I wanted. New Uncollected Poems.
It
found
it.
Yeah, it found you. And in it he says, wow, this book is a slapdash selection of some of the poems from those 5 vanity volumes. Some of the ones that didn't make it into the FSG book, plus a few new ones. Where is the one that he dedicated, where he says to me, keep them laughing? That's
the order of the poems is random.
With admiration and thanks from Bill Knott. Selected Poems, Volume 1. Oh my goodness, I can't find anything here. Selected.
So it says in the intro to these books, it'll say things like, something that might be familiar to you. I think every poem in this book was rejected at least once by some magazine or other, and indeed the majority here never did achieve periodical publication. An acknowledgments page would not be very, very impressive. So I think so many of our poets, are here kind of like, I've even published people of late who are like, oh, I'll send out my stuff for year after year. Does that qualify as an actual judgment coming down on your work, right? And Bill Knott decided, basically, fuck that, and I'm just going to make these books myself and not waste my time, which I should rather be spending on writing.
It should be obvious that if I could have found a real publisher for this book, I wouldn't be doing it myself. No one wants the humiliation of being a vanity author. So says Bill at the front of this book. And then, of course, he's got lots of blurbs that are saying how great he is. One of these has a book,
over 3 decades of critical acclaim on the back of Selected Poems Volume 2.
Published by himself. But one of these has just terrible quotes. You know, he was actually included in the Stuffed Owl, the worst poems ever written, had a Bill Knott, as simultaneously with his being, appreciated by the poets, as the poet's poet, he looked at himself as being, one of the worst poets who's ever written. And, here it is, Uncollected Poems. That's it. That's what I was looking for. That, and then, here it is. With Bill Knott is so sad one can only groan in response. Peter Stitt, Georgia Review. I have no idea if these quotes are real. Knott's poems are so naive that the question of their poetic quality hardly arises. Mr. Knott practices a dead language. Dennis Donahue, New York Review of Books. Bill Knott's poems are rhetorical fluff and fake. Ron Lowenson, Tri-Quarterly. I don't think these are real quotes. Bill Knott is incompetent. Alicia Ostreicher.
But the funny thing is that even if they are fake, we can imagine that they wouldn't be, because everyone knows that critic who's willing to say that sort of thing. I mean, everyone, knows that person who stands up after the lecture and makes the most inane comment that's just about them having some smart-ass thing to say. Right? I mean,
That's Bill, the smart-ass thing to say.
No one is surprised about that,
Oh.
So wait, let's read.
Acknowledgements. This is where I'm supposed to thank the editors of the journals where these poems first appeared, but I think everything in this book was rejected at least X times by various mags, and indeed the majority of the poems here never did achieve the honor of periodical publication.
So should we choose one?
I have this poem.
Okay.
My epitaph. Want to earn big money carving tombstones? Call now for details. And the last line is kind of smudged out with an asterisk. Unfortunately, snow or grass covers most of the phone number. So, how to say, and then he has one where he dedicates this. I'm publishing this because I've been rejected for a Guggenheim for the 11th time, but I know all those other poets are better than I am. So anyway, here they are.
So it's so funny because he's saying at the same time, I'm becoming a vanity poet, but he's absolutely not. He's just wanting to get the work out, and here it is. I mean, but there are all of those other. Are they mostly the actual
There's the BOA editions. Pittsburgh published his book. Another Big Table book. A Release Press, Barn Dreams Press. Another BOA edition. There was a FSG published a book. Of course, I don't have that one.
So some of these are coming out at the same time as the self-published
No,
stuff.
the self-published stuff came out later. He made this decision.
This one is from 2000. The
okay.
BOA.
Well, BOA, right?
BOA,
and then when are these?
And this is 2001.
Okay, well, this is 2005.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And some of these are a little earlier, I think, 1999. But they might, but they're the different poems, right? This is specifically comic poems, right? So maybe someone was collecting the comic poems, a different one.
I don't know which of Bill's poems aren't comic poems.
Well, there you are.
And that's why and then part of the reason, and Kenneth Koch also said the same thing, it's hard to be taken seriously when you are when your poems are funny. And I do think, that there's something in art, that it's a serious business because people don't appreciate it. So if it's funny,
I've edited humor out of poems before. I'm guilty of that.
And why did you?
Because it doesn't. Because at the time I don't do it as much anymore. But I definitely did when I was
You
younger.
don't need to. You did it because people don't like.
Because it changes the tone, right?
Yes.
if you're reading something out and you're sort of like, and it has, a certain amount of gravitas, and then you make sort of like a side comment, like some sort of humorous side comment.
You're the smart aleck guy.
You're the smart aleck guy, and you also kind of lose the crowd in terms of it changes your nature of the
You
audience.
lose one crowd and you gain another.
You gain a different one.
You see, and it's that writing for the ear and the air that Bill did, even though, my greatest, Bill showed up once in New York, and we hung out. His glasses had broken at what do you call this thing? That's not the temple. This thing had broken. So he had the bridge. He had wrapped gaffer's tape around it. It was like a third eye almost, and that's the way he was. Bob Rosenthal and I were hired after he left an apartment to clean it up. We were given, I don't know, $5 a piece, I think, to do this in Chicago. Sure. And we went in, the place was completely littered with Coca-Cola cans, garbage, takeout stuff. It was sad, but he was a purist for his work. Look at what he.
How many of us could claim to never have left our apartment in such condition?
Well, I don't know.
Bill
Knott is different. He's a different level. If this, he says about Quatorzains too, if this were printed correctly with a uniform font size and all, it would be the length of a regular book of poems. So please don't refer to it as a chapbook. He's just making fun of everybody as well as himself.
Well, it's really, it's really refreshing, because I think his refusal to pander is is amazing. Is really unique. And I don't know the sort of socioeconomics of how that was able to happen. I think
he
that a lot of
taught for years at Emerson.
There it is.
And he was able to, figure it out. I don't think he ever had a job except occasionally teaching, and he was renowned again for not showing up for class and not doing his work, etc. And he had, even though he comes off with the bravado in the poems, as a person, he was shy and stumbling and sad.
Yeah.
And you just felt for Bill, Here's Autumn Moon from Quatorzains 2. The tick hops in and out of the clock. The talk never budges. I just carefreed my clothes, but can they traverse their own buttonholes, pass through into a new suit, a transformation of the case? And watching it ever was, must I deface, like a sunflower dueling an asterisk, this? Deface. Right? Must I deface? His poems, he refused to not deface the poem. And of course, the clock's the face of the clock, and the sunflower and the asterisk, like surrealism, but not automatic writing. Just surrealism of the image train. He's the guy who said to me, and I always quote, a poem is a space shot into consciousness.
Yeah, that's right.
And I've never found a better, quick definition. And of course, it was that time. It was Cape Canaveral time. But I think we get it. That if you don't really do it and just go with it and let it take its own course, in a poem, you're something else. You're crafting it. I don't want to go up against the entire MFA. What a poem has to be stuff.
Yeah.
But
so do we know? What do we know about his process? Do we know? We talked about it's not quite automatic writing. Does he speak much, or did he speak much to you? Or I'm not that familiar with his style in terms of this. Does he edit much? Does he speak of sort of just writing the poems and letting them be? I wonder. I wonder just about his process. That would be something curious to.
I wish I knew.
Yeah.
And
perhaps
James
students
Tate.
of his could.
It would. Someone should write his biography, and someone should know this. And I got to say, I live Bill through his poems, and there's just, like you say, you can just open them up, and you'll be there. Here's pass around the copies. Have none of those nipples left specks on my lips? Are there no stains on my fingers from some of those warm hips? The ones I caressed so far in the past, nary a trace must still exist. And what about the hands that coupled, hands that cupped me, that didn't deposit any spots? Am I not a leopard of love? A leper, covered with its blotches, stigmata, errata, etc.? No, I'm not. Clean slate, bite mark, scratch mark, blood drop, none. I'm flawless, blank, immaculate, ready to be run off on death's Xerox. One more poem, perfect for the workshop. It's called Pass Around the Copies. And now you don't get the idea that he only wrote about the horrors of where poetry is going and that he couldn't do it and therefore was a bad poet. It's not, but there sure is a lot about it. And
but he doesn't have the inadmissible, he doesn't have, this is going on in my life, but this isn't what my poetry is about, right? He addresses everything, all the aspects, including the aspects. It's like studying up in the academy, right? He's absolutely willing to look right at it and also write poems about it because it's very much part of his experience.
Exactly, and he can do that at the same time where he's writing about his body.
Yeah.
Where the book as body in that poem, which is clean slate, blank page. He does not have any of these bite marks from his past loves, nor is, and at the same time, it's like editing it out for purposes of being able to, quote, pass around the copies,
right,
as opposed to pass around the real thing. What is the real thing? I mean, he's just taking the philosophical, the ineffable, and realizing it with humor. You could. Where's Ant Dodger? Is that in this? Is that in this book? Is that in the first one here? Two American poets, footnote to Mozart.
Ant Dodger.
Oh, you found it. You are so good. I love this kind of work.
Here we go.
Okay, why don't you read Ant Dodger?
So Ant Dodger, and this is, in this particular instance, in Bill Knott Poems 1963 to 1988 from the University of Pittsburgh Press. Ant Dodger. A suicide applicant who braces himself out on a high ledge at noon while busy peeking down, noticed an ant crawling doughtily on the ledge right there near his left toe. Below, crowds all pushed, oblivious, babbling, omniscient like in the movies, out whooshy doors. But his gaze halt ant, the true ant he dimly remembers not like them. So now he hesitates, a million stories up, shifts weight, trying, make his mind up, distantly deciding whether to step before he jumps on it or
not. I'm intimately connected with suicide. I think many people are, if not most people, have suicide in their lives, and to have a poem that takes on suicide with humor is illegal.
Yeah.
I mean, and yet this is his corpse and beans. He's a million stories. This is a narrative, but it's a narrative of hyperbole. Like what are the details? He's a million stories up. The crowd is omniscient. And there by his left toe is this ant. And then what's that line after that about the real? That one I didn't quite.
Ant, the true ant?
Ant, where's that? Ant. His gaze halt ant. Ant, the true ant. He dimly remembers. What is that? I mean, I like the whooshy doors.
Me
There's
too.
no, there's
I like the
no,
sounds. Yeah.
what it's the revolving door that everybody's coming out in the town, right? Whooshy. That's a great whooshy. How could that be oblivious babbling? So now he hesitates a million stories up, shifts weight, trying make his mind up, distantly deciding whether to step before he jumps on it or not. You know, the disrupting the syntax for the decision to be held, the fermata, you know, and then the big question: are you going to step on an amp before you jump off the building or not? I mean, what's the decisions of life, you know?
I mean, I love that he's finding humor there. Like, I love that, again, I love that he's willing to do this inadmissible thing. He is not, nothing is sacred. I mean, and
Yeah.
well,
Life is just to be. Yeah, it is hard. Look, in this, but of course, I mean, it's always been a lot of thought police, and
Mm-hmm.
and Knott did nothing to help himself,
Sure.
right? Like I say, but do you have to? I mean, people did love his poems, and the poets who helped him: Robert Bly, Robert Hass. He had James Tate, where these people were like huge fans and said he was great, but something would not let him, you know, his ambitions were not for that. His ambitions were to be the the the, the, the bottom of it. I wanted to.
He clearly still kept applying, though. I mean, he did. He kept applying because in every book that he writes, he's saying, "I sent these."
Do you believe him?
Maybe.
Maybe I believe him too. I really don't know. And again, this is why a biography was good. I'm not that guy. I am that guy who is, when it's time to remember Bill Knott again.
Mm-hmm.
And for people who haven't had the great, the great experience of reading his poems, to kick out and read them.
Absolutely.
He he sent the Bowery Poetry Club was open, and there's something about the way the Bowery Poetry Club wanted to be for everybody. The way it always was chasing its own tail to stay open until we settled into the 2.0 with our partnership with the Burlesque Club, so we could be open on the, so we can not have to pay the rent. Something about that, and the feelings I took out of the Nuyorican, and before that out of the Poetry Project, really about these alt poets who and I love all, I'm an enthusiast. I love poetry, and I love, my house is filled with books. It ain't that, but it's just that there's got to be room for Bill, and he was, the trite, his own worst enemy, etc. And but if I guarantee you a great time and an opening of the senses when you give him a good read.
So should we read another poem or two?
Oh, I think we should do that. And that would be that would be the thing to do.
I mean, I wonder where one can find these, if they're in any collections. I bet Buffalo has them.
Yeah.
They must. Buffalo, I'm sending your package this week. You should have these.
Yes, Buffalo should have them. Write to me.
Write to Bob.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, right, Bill, given the way that these were distributed, and that, it's such an interesting question for people who are now like, oh, is it okay for me to self-publish? Is it okay for me to distribute my books? I mean, here's someone who was putting that question right in your face. The tradition of doing that. Like, here are these dozens of books here. Better to have them or not? Definitely better to have them in my, and for me, like, I would so much rather have this pile of stuff than have him have spent those years not putting these books together. I'm so grateful that they exist, and how many people in our current environment are not putting these books together in the face of just trying to get someone else to say that it's okay, right? How many people are not fitting in with what people are looking for, right? How many people are not creating work that is the particular tenor of this time, and those people, to them I say, do this.
And here we are in this. He was coming off of the days of Mimeo and chapbooks, although these are not chapbooks according to him, because he won't even accept that, right?
Sure.
But where collating parties were how you created a book. It was the human touch, the populist touch of publishing then that was going on at the same time that that the famous book publishers were also creating these hierarchies, which. So now we have digital consciousness. And you know it so well because you play out there. This is where so people can just get their work out, but everybody is still trying to get these guys to publish their stuff, and the beat goes on. I say about the beat poets, so there's lots to be learned, but I can't say it. You read the poems and he'll say it. I found this one that I wanted to read. Do it. I can't believe. Well, why don't we read every other line or something here?
Okay.
Suicidal or simply drunken thoughts on being refused a Guggenheim grant for the 11th time. War headlines, peace tale stanzas, don't
like to feel real. Scare tactics take practice.
So that institutionally a wine corked
by the horn of a charging unicorn might.
The fur opens and my face ain't.
The fur closes. Eyes, lips, nose resume.
The wretched perfection of featureifice.
The dumbpan plan, identity, lack of choice.
I cling to virgin, this veil scraped surface.
Where our scars are an armor of absence.
What night attains. Ignore
that pig bladder matter, life that failure.
Dangled in whiskey like a long shot tooth.
The night has no thoughts heavier than itself.
Note, an homage, of course, to all those poets who've won Googies. After all, they're all better poets than I am, aren't they? And I have no right to be bitter, do I? Because I'm not really a real poet, am I? No, I'm a poet biscuit. Poet biscuit. Worth noting.
I want to be a poet. That's good.
Where else would be? That's in the new book, right? The first night, what night attains, is with a K, and the last line, night, is the night with an N. I just.
We could. I mean, I personally want to go into all the books and read them.
Pennywise. Well, all right. I grant you, he was a fascist. Anti-Semitism, the war, and all. I'm not defending them, but at least you've got to admit at least he made the quatrains run on time. No, 2 puns explain the title and last line. Penny wise, pound foolish.
Yeah.
And Mussolini's admirers used to say, well, he may be a fascist, but at least he makes the trains run on time. So for Bill Knott, he makes the quatrains run on time.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks.